happening in the world, and definitely we're going to have Lee Newton Rhodes and Debbie Peterson coming up shortly, and they'll be talking about a number of those things happening in the world as well. So we're definitely looking forward to that conversation between them, and I'll probably be popping in and out as well. As y'all can tell, I'm over at the Hayti Heritage Center where I'm doing the work over here and all in that space. So I'll bring them up shortly. They'll have a great conversation and all along those lines. But in the meantime, I do want to tell folks that there is the news out of the Ukraine. Ukraine has fired several officials amid Zelensky's anti corruption push, and a number of other things are going on in that space as well. And then we're seeing that the UK is having a tax dispute going on in that way. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to what's happening in Monterey and in that space. So I'm going to bring up my other folks. They're going to be having some conversations as well. So I'm going to bring up Debbie Peterson as well as Lee Newton Rhodes. And I'm sure that they might have some thoughts on a number of these other things going on in the world. So glad to bring them up. We're glad for them to have that conversation. And of course, I've also got the Sasha Star coming at us from Canada, and he'll probably have some things to say about what's taking place in the Ukraine and all in that kind of way. So glad to have y'all here. Like I said, every once in a while, usually doing it from home, but this time over at the Cultural Arts Center that I work at. So I know that y'all might have some thoughts about some of the things that are taking place and all of that way. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts and conversation. But I'm going to check on out while y'all have these lovely conversations. Sasha, I'm sure you got all kinds of things to say about what's going on in the Ukraine. But I'll start off with Debbie, and if she's got any observations about what's happening in California, and then I'll be back very shortly.
Mark, just 10 minutes ago, I've learned that on January 21st, just 2 days ago, there were demonstrations in 70 cities around the world for Ukraine and against Putin. So when thousands and thousands of people all over the world, just in Germany, there were demonstrations in Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Leipzig, and many more cities, that alone should put pressure on its Chancellor Scholz with his reluctance to approve sending all available military to Ukraine. Because right now is the most important point in a world history and politics since Second World War. No situation was such an important as this one, because once and for all, the Russia, which were threatening and still threatening the world with thermonuclear weapons, 3 generations of people live in fear that they may use them. Right now, without losing even a single Western or American life, brave and fearless Ukrainians are doing the job that West and US should have done many years ago. First, between 1951 and 1957, second time in 1991-92 when Soviet Union was dissolved. Now is the third and perhaps the last time when the opportunity knocks on our doors to get rid of the world of this menace. And Ukrainians are doing that. They are sacrificing the lives of the best and the bravest people. Now here in America, we have these bureaucrats and bookkeepers who say, well, this is a little bit too much, maybe we should do this. I just heard on CNBC there was interview with the chairman and president of Raytheon Technologies. And he was saying that from what he understands, all America wants to do exactly that, helping Ukrainians. Ukrainians are in very integral part, ethnic Ukrainians, integral part of the United States. If you remember movies, The Deer Hunters, who are the main heroes of that movie? They are Ukrainians, at least ethnic Ukrainians living in Pennsylvania. This is
Sasha,
people they are. Yes.
good morning.
Good
Oh, good
morning.
morning. Thank you for sharing your views. There doesn't seem to be an end date in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Why does not the UN or US get and just say, you know what, let's either put up or shut up?
Okay.
Why drag Ukraine for so long? So many lives lost or damaged or ruined in Ukraine. Doesn't seem fair to Ukrainians.
Okay. This is the same thing as if you would ask me why there is a beautiful girl, so attractive, and here is a man who is impotent. Why he cannot make love to this girl? Because he's an impotent, right?
So it's never going to happen, you're saying.
What I'm saying is that UN is impotent organization, which is good for nothing. They
So
cannot.
let's take the UN off the table. Let's take the UN off the table then. We have
Okay.
the United States, we have France, we have other countries.
United
Western-
States is in fear of Mr. Putin. They are going one step by one. They're sending some javelins. They're sending some a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Right now is a decisive time when Ukraine is planning a huge offensive, and they need still some pieces. And this is what the chairman of Raytheon Technologies just said, that they are working now on Ukrainian orders 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have enough people. They're hiring more and more people. Now there are a lot of people are available from high-tech companies, including Apple and Microsoft and others. They're hiring some of those people, but they still need many, many more people. And one thing is missing: the Patriot systems that are so much needed in Ukraine. They don't get order from U.S. government for these systems. They can prepare them, but it takes time. But they don't get orders, and it's very difficult to procure systems. Very expensive. It's a high-tech technology. They are not available anywhere in the world beside United States company Raytheon. And there are no orders. And I think it was Kramer who asked him, "Why is that so?" And you know what he said? He said, because of the very small but very vocal group of Trumpists in Congress who prevent doing that. This is why. It's a very small group. It's maybe 10% of a Republican congressmen. But this 10%, they're very vocal and they're screaming and they're going here and there and so on. And this is how they're hurting United States, its interests and its people. This
Hey,
is what is
Sasha.
happening.
Hey, Sasha. There's also been talk that Poland is asking Germany for permission to export the tanks. So I was wondering your thoughts around that, and if that's something that needs to happen. And then I was also curious your thoughts around Sweden being rejected into NATO, but apparently Finland is doing some lobbying to get into NATO, and apparently there's some conversations around that involving Turkey. But I don't understand all the consequences and things revolving around that. So if you've got any observations about both of those, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Speaking about Finland and Sweden, Turkey, which is, I remember it's not normal Western country, although it's a member of NATO. It's not a member of European Union, and European Union rejects it every time it stopped to apply because they are operating under different rules, moral and others. Now, so they want to be on both sides. They are in NATO, so obviously they're on the Western side, but they want to be also on the Russian side. And they are accommodating some, for example, trading in Russian oil and gas a little bit, and they're trying to be there. What's if one day, the logic is this, what if one day West and United States, of course, will stop helping Ukraine? Well, this little local group of Republicans and others or so on, and the United States will say, okay, you know what, leave it alone. So, okay, so Russia will take over Ukraine. So is taking over Ukraine, then all Black Sea is becoming controlled by Russians, and Turkey is a big part of the Black Sea. So they have to then deal with Russia only. So they don't want to burn the bridges and say that Putin is wrong and so on. There were no demonstrations of kinds that I was talking about in Turkey. That's for sure.
Not.
So they
How
want
about China?
Sorry.
How about China? How about China, Sasha? Has China taken sides?
At first, they took Putin's side, but Putin is a pathological liar. He talked to Chairman Xi. He told him right before the invasion. He told him that they will take Kyiv in 3 days and all Ukraine in 7 days, and they will install the government and so on. And Chairman Xi says, "Okay, please do it." Putin failed to deliver. He's
Big time.
liar. So Chairman Xi now he's working on smoothing his relationship with the West, with the United States. He's mildly successful, I would say, not big time, but at least he's moving into that direction. And also, China has a very long story with Russia about certain territories regarding Amur River in the east. In the Far East. And China now will have a great opportunity once Soviet Union, Russia, it will start to dissolve. They will definitely have a claim on these territories. And you know what? If there will be a referendum even today, all those territories would become part of China. They don't want to deal with Russia at all. A lot of Russian people, in spite that visibly they are supporting Putin. He's got in the last election, if you can call it election, he's got 70% of all voices. But in reality, if a real election with candidates who would be allowed to campaign, he would hardly get 30%, maybe 35%. Whereas in Ukraine, when the last election was called, Vladimir Zelensky became the elected president of Ukraine, 73% of the voices. Now, Russia started a new wave of propaganda by telling their people on television, elsewhere, that it is not you fight Ukraine. Absolutely not. The West, the United States, used Ukraine as to attack Russia, and they want to have a decision, the final decision about Russian question. Same thing as Hitler wanted to have a final question of the Jewish question. So now it's a coming time to make the Russian final decision. So this is incredible lie, and it's only in a sick brains of people like Russian leadership, starting with Putin, Lavrov, and others, to come with such a preposterous lie. Because nobody attacked Russia, nobody was told. So even now, a lot of people in the West and the United States are talking about saving Putin's face. That they have to allow him to peacefully.
Well, they seem to be doing that now, because if they wanted to, they could put a financial embargo on them. Could they not, in terms of fuel and cutting off?
There is financial embargo. There is a fuel ceiling of how expensive prices they can pay to Russians. It's now $60 a barrel. Nobody can pay any more than $60 a barrel for Russian oil. Even the oil will skyrocket to $100 a barrel. So 60 will be paid to Russian and 40 will go to fund the Ukraine.
Why are they buying any Russian oil?
Well, because there is India, there is China, there are a few other countries that are buying, but they know at what prices, 40%, 45% discount. But it's still money. it's still money. So
No, it's
I
definitely still money. Hey, Sasha and everybody else, one question that I was going to ask, and maybe Deb has some thoughts around this as well, is there is another issue that's going around the world, which is a population and population control. And apparently there in Japan, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is seeking to hike the politically unpopular consumption tax to cover the child care policies he's trying to advance. So apparently they're worried about population control over there in Japan, and there's speculation about a tax hike to do that. So Kishida had pledged to focus on child-related policies in 2023, an apparent attempt to buoy the sagging popularity of his cabinet ahead of a string of local elections in the spring by appealing to young parents. So I was just wondering, Deb, if you got any thoughts about some of these efforts around countries and maybe even in the United States in the sense of population control. I know that had been an issue around China. I think that they moved away from their one child policy that they used to have and the things in that space. But I was just wondering if that's something that folks in the United States, maybe even in some of the areas that have high births, might want to even think about doing. Not saying that I would be a proponent of that, but there's all kinds of crazy things that are proposed out there in the world. And I was just wondering if you've ever heard any of these kind of speculations, even in office when you were in California, and if you had any thoughts about that in general, because the latest issue of this coming up is coming out of Japan.
Well, I certainly recognize that it's been something that's been on the table since I was a small child. I remember my mother discussing it with me as an environmental issue. And the reality is, unless we control it, it will control us, as it maybe has done with the coronavirus. Maybe that's part of nature's plan. I'm not sure, but don't quote me on that. But one of the struggles I have with it is that the people who are embracing it, and many young people are embracing it here in the United States. The problem is they're the brightest and the best, and they're the ones whose children we need for the future to solve some of these problems. So I'm conflicted about it. When my son tells me that he's not sure he wants to bring children into the world, and his friends tell me the same, and they're all some of the top graduates from top universities at some of the top IT companies in Silicon Valley, that worries me, because those are the people whose kids we need. That's the brain power that we're going to need for the future. So I think that we maybe need to look at some other ways to address it, but I certainly don't want to discourage only the voters and only the thinkers from raising bright, healthy children.
Debbie, just two questions for you, if you don't mind. One is, why is the current generation like that? They're getting married later and having less children. And two, is it both males and females wanting less children?
Well, from what I can see, and of course this is purely subjective, but from what I can see, it's both males and females. It's basically young, bright graduates who are concerned about the fact that we are overpopulated and will continue to become more.
Is it that, yeah. Or they're just? I don't know what selfish is the right word. They're more career oriented. They don't want children that can get in their way.
No, it's not. It's not a selfish. It's not a in my generation, it was selfish. With me, it was selfish. I wanted to have my career, but right. No, that's not what I'm hearing at all. It's out of concern for the environment. And in some cases, I think there's an element of discouragement about what's happening in the United States. They're really not happy about what's happening. They don't want to bring kids into this.
Male and female. Gotcha.
Male and female. Yeah, I'm seeing it across the board. And again, I'm talking about a very small group of kids who I've known since they were small children. But right. But that they and their friends seem to share this view.
So then maybe there is a need for greater immigration then to replace those that we are ourselves not replacing through natural birthing.
It's a really good. I really appreciate you making that point. I lived in Scotland for 20 years, and one of the ways in which they really differed in the whole Brexit issue was that they were welcoming immigrants. They understand in Scotland that they're a small country, that they have exported some of the world's greatest engineers for centuries now, and they really desperately need to bring in immigrants. And certainly in the Scandinavian countries, I think that the rate of immigration per annum is about 17%, because they recognize that they need They need that. And so
Both skilled workers and there's a brain drain when they don't. Right.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
so is Canada. Canada is now allocating 1.5 million immigrants in next, I think, year or year and a half time, because Canada is a huge country, obviously underpopulated, and immigration is probably the only way to deal with it. But I'll tell you on my own experience, I'll tell you that it's very difficult to make the decision whether to have children or not, unless you have them. If you have children, grandchildren, by the way, then you can't even imagine
Yeah.
not to have them. Now, if you don't have them, then there are so many opportunities, there are so much things to do, or so on, that, so if the wife gets pregnant without planning to do so,
Mhm.
that's a great thing, because that is a way to bring children, I think, because to make a decision in most cases, probably it will be negative whether to have children or not. Probably it will be.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Sasha, and for Debbie. Are we seeing religious families, whether it's Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, whatever, having more children than secular families?
I don't know the statistics on that. Certainly, it seems that historically that's been well, two things. Historically, yes, I think religious families in some cases have pushed, have lots of kids to populate the world, but or spread the message. The other side of that, of course, is that all of my ancestors had 11 kids. Well, for one, they didn't have birth control, and it was cold,
Right.
and there was nothing else to do in the middle of winter. But on the other hand, half of them died when they were young, even in the early 1900s. So
Right.
you might start with 13 and end up with 6. But I had a question for Sasha, and I'm sorry, diverting from yours, but I'm really
No, that's
curious
fine.
about Canada's stance on the Ukraine. I'm not aware of that at this point.
Oh, Canada is a great friend of Ukraine, and Victoria Friedland, who is now a minister in Trudeau's government, she's groomed as the successor to United Nations president, and Ukraine is sending hundreds of armored vehicles to Ukraine, sending a lot of ammunition and the people to train the soldiers. And it's taking in a lot of people from Ukraine now to how bring them to life here in Canada. And at the same time, it's sending, there are a lot of volunteers fighting in Ukrainian army from Canada. Canada has also large Ukrainian population. And there are several waves of Ukrainians are coming to Canada, starting from even before the Russian Revolution, and then after Second World War. A lot of people, Ukrainian descendants, they were fighting against Soviet Union. They fight Germany as well, but they were also fighting for years the Soviet Union. So a lot of these people are housed here in Canada, and Canada's stand on Ukraine is very definite. It's one of the greatest. If you take help per capita, the biggest actually supporter of Ukraine is a very small country of Estonia. Its population only 1.5 million, and they're sending the help in a way it's well over 1.25% of their GDP. So Americans' help is actually not even.
Hey, Sasha, just really quickly, another subject that had crossed my mind, and definitely a lot of people are supporting what's going on with the Ukrainian soldiers and everything. But just to get to another part of the world, it does look like Nigeria has opened a game changer $1 billion deep seaport in Lagos. So they're saying that could be a game changer in the sense of their economy. And they were already one of the stronger economies in Africa. And of course, it was being funded by the fine folks over there in China and all of that. So that is one of the things that folks I might have some concerns about. But there's also some concerns just about the nature of the African continent and where it may be going in terms of its leadership and all in that way. But I didn't know, Debbie, if you had any thoughts, or even Lee or others, about this. And I did see a quote, and we kind of talked about this organization a minute ago, that the UN secretary gave about how the state of the world is, and all in that way. And I'll bring that up as well. And matter of fact, I'll bring it up now. But the United States Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "Our world is plagued by a perfect storm on a number of fronts." He called for an urgent action on a number of interconnected challenges, including the global economic crisis, climate, income and gender inequality, U.S.-China relations, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now more than ever, it is time to forge the pathways to cooperation in our fragmented world. So he was actually saying that the world has got a lot of divide, and I know part of that divide is China's influence on things, including the influences around Africa and the Asian countries. But I didn't know if any one of you three had any thoughts about that, and I'll start with Debbie, since she's our guest of honor on this particular day, and she's becoming like a regular panelist. Hopefully she'll pop in on a regular basis whenever she's available. I want to make her a regular
If only
panelist.
I could get up at 5 every morning, I would be happy to do that. I am a night person, so it's a huge challenge. But I'm actually really happy to see Nigeria, to see an African country taking an action like that and having some economic success. That's a great thing, and a good thing for the whole world. It is a little bit worrying to see China investing, but I can't speak to it apart from those personal opinions, because I haven't researched it. I really don't know enough about it to say anything apart from that.
Yeah. You have any observations, either Sasha or Lee, just about this nature of how the world is going? The UN Secretary General did mention some of those things that I
Mark, you mentioned something about a pay gap. Can you just repeat that part, please?
Oh, sure. Let me get back. When he was talking about the different things that are plaguing the world, one of the things he said was income and gender inequality. So that was one of the things that he thought was plaguing the world.
Yeah, I just wish people would stop pushing that, because I don't think there's facts to support that. But for this, what kind of employer would hire a man for twice or whatever percentage more, and more, when they can hire a similarly qualified woman for less? It just makes no business sense.
I don't know, but Debbie, maybe you can allude to that. But I do understand that it's my understanding there is an income.
But people don't do things logically, and
from a business standpoint,
they don't do things. Well, business is often based on logic, but the facts are out there. I don't think that the statistics are lies, and
well, I don't think the statistics support that. When you look at men and women with the same number of years of experience, qualifications, and what have you, obviously, women, I think, tend towards more different fields than men do based on choice, and some of them less well-paying. Whether educate. I think women, at least historically, went towards education. Teachers, which is not the highest paying job, while men maybe historically went towards more, whether law, whether medicine, which is a higher paying job. Obviously, they both have different requirements in terms of education and work commitments. But for women who've never been out of the workforce and men who've never been out of the workforce, I don't know that there's data to support that they're being paid differently.
The data I'm seeing says that they are, and I can't really speak to it, but I think going back to the Ukraine, we have a very close family friend who is in her mid-50s now, grew up in the Ukraine and emigrated. And when she was in college in Kiev, 50% of the students were women in the computer department, in the computer engineering. And I think we're still at about, last I heard was 10%. Hopefully it's a little bit better than that now. And I don't. And
I'm sorry, why do you mean, why does the percentage matter? Because isn't it a choice what your major is?
Well, the percentage matters because it's telling us something about why is it in this country that we don't have women in some of those higher paid thing. To me, it's just quite bizarre.
It's an
that
excellent question.
25
But there,
years ago,
it's an-
there were
yeah.
50% women in the Ukraine doing computer degrees, and still here we're only at 10%. That I don't know.
no,
tells
I'm
me
saying
something.
I understand that. It's an excellent question, but people shouldn't be forced to go into majors they don't want to go into.
No, but she wasn't there by force. She was there by choice.
No, I understand that.
And it was very hard to get there when she did. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like I chose not to go into medicine. So the fact that there's
Sure.
less men or whatever in medicine or whatever field than women, to me, it's irrelevant. I just chose not to go or into law. I chose not to go into those fields.
I think when we spoke about the birth rate in the world, I think we made two major omissions. One is being that China is getting less and less populated, and very soon India will overcome China as most populated country.
But that was by design by China.
Yeah, perhaps certain things happening in Russia, where historically the 60% of population in Russia was women and 40% men. Now, don't forget that half of this 40% are impotent, and they are queers. And now, with the mobilization in Russia, most of the able men population will be sent to die in Ukraine. So the question is now, where the Russian women will get fathers for their children. Where? How? The answer is only one. It's China. There are a lot of very successful marriages, especially in Siberia, Far East, between Russian women and Chinese men. Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe by now hundreds of thousands, because Chinese men, they are working 18 hours a day. They eat very little, mostly rice.
Sasha?
Yes.
You're making a very good point, but maybe that's why some societies are promoting unmarried sex. Because these women can only get, one husband, but they can have as many partners as they want.
Well, you can't promote unmarried sex because if there is no desire in a man to have sex, you cannot promote it. It's useless. And
No, it is. There are no responsibilities. These women want children. You don't have to marry me. I just want to get pregnant. I want my child.
I think it's more complicated. I think, again, that both men and women in the West are very selfish, and they're much more interested in their careers.
No, I understand that, but even Barack Obama spoke about the lack of fathers in the home in America among all races, not just black.
Yeah.
Well, he can talk about it 5 times a day. What would change?
But we're seeing an increase over generations. When we were children, we didn't have that so much. And each generation since then, it has been increasing the number of fatherless homes.
Well, there are certain biological traits that will bring more children to this world or less. And the policy and the statements by somebody like Obama will do very little to change anything at all.
Well, and Sasha's talking about a 40-60 split. When you've got 60% women and 40% men, there aren't as many men around to have kids with. And if a certain percentage of them are gay or a certain percentage of them are impotent, then you've got
even less.
It really reduces the pool.
I'm not talking about drinking problems in Russia, where most men are simply, they may not be impotent or gays, but they're simply drunks 24 hours a day. That doesn't help either.
That doesn't help in the least bit.
Good.
But
not good father material.
Yeah, Debbie, one of the questions I was curious about is actually what Lee was referring to, and I did want to get back to the pay gap question really quickly because I did find some statistics while y'all were talking and everything. But sometimes I wonder how much of this is government designed, for lack of a better term, and everything, because I don't know that we necessarily discourage folks from having kids, and if we're giving them a certain amount of government support and certain amounts of other things that can have them stay on the dole, for lack of a better term, and things in that space. So I'm wondering how much of that is intentional by government agencies, and I would say that might be on both the left and the right. I don't think that that's one that is a either left or right issue, but if government is providing things that are welfare based, that are encouraging people to stay in the system, then it becomes almost a business to have children.
Yeah, it's an argument I've heard, and it's not something I can really speak to because when at a local government level, especially in a very small town, we really don't get involved with that. It's not part of our remit. It's more of a county or a state level issue, or even a national issue. So it's not something I have a perception on.
Yep, I understand. So I was just curious. That was just a thought that crossed my mind. But I did want to get back to the pay issue because, Lisa, your question, then, and this was before COVID, there was a report that said when they polled about 20,000 U.S. doctors in 30 specialties, pay for physicians had risen by about 20% for both primary physicians and specialists, but increases have not been equal for male and female doctors. So male care physicians earned about 18% more than their female colleagues, and that gulf had widened to 25%.
No, Mark, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm not saying that's not true. But you have to take into account years worked. You have to take into account specialties. There's a lot you have to take into account. You can't just throw everybody into a basket because you're saying there's a pay gap between races because NBA basketball players are making more, than accountants. It's not fair to say that. There's a lot you have to break down. Chris Greco is not here
I
today.
get the point. You have to compare apples with apples.
Correct. Even within fields.
Mm-hmm. And that's a fair point. And that is a reason why women on the whole are earning less, obviously, because they take time out to have children, or don't work at all. But I still, from everything I've seen, statistically, women are still earning less than men, even when they're doing equal jobs with equal experience. So we may be looking at different statistics, and that's an interesting question when looking at those statistics to make sure that it's apples with apples.
Yeah, and that would be a fair thing. And just for the racial pay gap, just since you brought it up, that same report that I was looking at said that the average income for a white doctor was $319,000, and compared to $303,000 for a Hispanic and a Latino doctor, $300,000 for an Asian doctor, and $281,000 for an African American doctor. So, like I said, that is a vastly different amount of money. Of course, I'd be glad to get any of those amounts of money at this particular
Mark,
time.
one of the most brilliant, and in my opinion, economists we have nowadays is Thomas Sowell. I just put one of his quotes up in the chat if you want to read that.
Okay, I'll see if I can't find it and read that as well.
Yeah, he's quite a character.
When you compare women and men in the same occupation with the same skills, education, hours of work, and many other factors that go into determining pay, the differences in income shrink to the vanishing point, and in some cases, the women earn more than comparable men.
Sure.
But, as we all know, statistics, there's statistics, and damn lies. You can get statistics to say whatever you want if you take it out of context.
Right, exactly. But there is definitely some pay gap things that need to be addressed. And I think that that's just some things that have not been fully addressed. I think it's like 80 cents to $1 in most jobs for women to man and all in that space. So definitely, I don't think that that's been thoroughly addressed, and I still think there's something that needs to be addressed in society, but I'm not running for
And the same thing between the genders, the same thing between races, the same argument could be made. It should be addressed, it should be studied, but it should not be taken out of context for all the factors that we just mentioned, Thomas Sowell mentioned.
I would say that a lot of that would be changed if more and more women would be in top management positions like CEOs and presidents of the companies. Unfortunately, that's lacking at this time, and even in certain attempts where it appeared to be that it works, like Carly Fiorina in charge of substantial company, Hewlett Packard, and some others. I think that generally speaking, women just don't have a killer's instinct to become a part of the top management. It's a biological thing. I don't think it could be. Although some women are much more aggressive than the majority of men, but on the very, very, very top, only the fittest survive. And this is unfortunately a world when women still cannot compete. Mostly through biological and also life experience patterns. And from the top of the pyramid, when you're going all the way down, of course, in similar positions with similar experience.
Sasha,
There,
yeah, but when we take out physical reasons for women not competing, such as sports, where obviously size matters, do you see in the chess world there's a lack of women competing at the top levels?
Chess is a very specialized activity. Yes, indeed, men are much superior to women. And in fact, I already said before, my wife, who was 8 times Canadian chess champion and who would beat probably 99.99% of the men in chess, she was one who wrote article, which I cannot locate, but I will. She wrote an article many years ago, why men are superior in chess to women. So she, who would beat majority of all males in Canada, she wrote article by that name because she realized, and actually I helped her to prepare this article, that there are some biological reasons. For example,
is it biological or is it educational? They're not made to think analytically.
Let's start with biological, because educational thing you can change or adjust. Biological things you cannot. And it's just the two brain's hemispheres, they're wired in females differently from the men. It doesn't make them inferior to men at all, because it's just different. In many cases, females are superior to men, especially when it's becoming to expressing themselves, the command of the language, or so many other things. But chess is in the area where the superiority of men is basically biological, and it may remain so for a considerable time, because if it's biological, it may remain so forever. So it's a very interesting phenomenon that has very little to do with real life, because chess is not a real life. It's a fantastic game. I love it. I play 10 speed games every day. But sorry, it's not even a model life.
But Sasha, along those same lines, and I'm probably going to get into an argument with everybody here. Maybe Debbie will agree with me. There have been some very famous cases of some amazing women that have led movements, led whole nations, and definitely done well in that space. So I don't know that I quite buy this Darwinistic argument that you're giving about.
You mean like Margaret Thatcher or Golda Meir?
Less developed or less smart or anything of that nature, or even less physically fit. I mean, I can think of folks like Harriet Tubman, if we want to go way back in history, that definitely was a very tough woman and definitely was not afraid to tackle on any man. As a matter of fact, there was some men that were in that slavery space that were deathly afraid of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, if we look at that space. And definitely I would even put Susan B. Anthony, that was one of the founders of the feminist movement, in that space as well. And definitely there's been some others, including some of
those are outliers, are they
warriors in Africa and all of that. But I'd love to hear Debbie's thoughts, because I think that it is not fair to say that women cannot be physically fit and intelligent and a number of other categories, and that men have a kind of like a superior system of
I think one of the things, you know, when my mother was in the early days of feminism, burning her bra, I think that there was very much a movement towards men and women are the same, and you know, and I think men and women should be equal in terms of opportunity and equal in terms of choice.
Equal, agree.
But I do, but I think that one of the things that we've come to now, several decades on, is that men and women are different, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. Biologically, there are good reasons for it, I'm certain, and However, one of the things that troubles me is that we aren't equally represented at a government level. And I do think that when you look at the countries now who are more equal in terms of having women in elected positions, the people are polling as being happier. The people are saying there's less corruption. The people are saying democracy is more open. And so I think that there are characteristics that women bring to the table that we would all benefit from if there were 50% women at the table. And that stretches to corporations as well.
Yeah, fair question is, I'm sorry, since women vote, overall, women are voting for men, are they not?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think that there is that an element of that, and I think politics is a difficult business.
Debbie, along those same lines, Dr. Anthony, who does a show on this network, has a very interesting point. I'd love to hear your counter argument to her, but she is of the opinion, and by the way, Dr. Anthony is an educator out of the DC area, but she is of the opinion that quite a few, and I'll just put it bluntly, white women voted against their interests when they supported Trump. She thinks that they voted counter to their own personal interests and all in that space. And she can't figure out why they did it, because she was going like they were totally voting against their own personal agenda as well as their wider agenda, and in that space. And I wish that I had invited her so she could speak in her own words.
Yeah.
I
have the same question, and I'm not going to talk politics because I don't think it's necessarily constructive. However, I think if we agree on so much more than we disagree on, we'll disagree. But I do think that it's something we need to understand, and I want to understand it. I've been writing a blog for Psychology Today on women, happiness, corruption, and government, and the nexus between those. And there is a nexus, and those are statistics that probably aren't so much up for grabs. They are, for the most part, empirically and scientifically based. But I'm gonna look at that one. I want to know the answer to that. I think we all know the answer to that one.
Sorry, Debbie, would you agree with this that there is a certain thing,
225.
Maternity?
225.
Sorry, Sasha, a certain maternal
maternity instincts, and of women, they have empathy, a lot of empathy, much more than males. And when the women see the ultimate loser of all times, who lost election, who lost House, who lost impeachments twice, who lost Senate, who lost just all his...
Yeah, but you have someone in mind?
He lost, somebody who lost everything there was to lose. So women feel a lot of empathy for that person, and they would like him to just get a little bit out of a hole who digged it himself and just dive his dignity. And that's probably the reason why would they vote for certain individuals again.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's, as far as corruption is concerned, women tend to be tougher on it. At least that's what the statistics are showing. And that certainly was my experience interestingly enough, when it actually came down, it was probably 50-50 men and women in my community who were fighting against corruption. But when it came down to the women in government who were willing to take it down, the women on boards, they were the females who were CEOs, and with the exception of one male mayor, it was me, a female mayor, who went to battle against corruption. It was the women, which is very interesting. And so I there's an argument that women will go to battle. They might not pick the fight, but they may stand up for the fight, and they may push for the greater good of the community more than for personal benefit. I think those are female traits more so than male traits. And certainly women on boards, apparently statistically, there are a lot of studies on this one now. Statistically, when you have women on boards, they often are more fiscally responsible. And by responsible, I don't mean to society. I mean to accountability and fiscally sound.
But Debbie, don't you agree that overall, men are much more prone to all kind of criminal acts including
Look at the
white
jail, Sasha.
look at the population in jail, actually. Why not?
Hello, Kimberly.
So, of course, ideally, there should be a law that majority of the corporate boards should be women. So this way, the board would be much less prone to do all kind of criminal things. For example, to get funds away from shareholders and stockholders and so on. And ideally, in the near future, the men should be barred from all corporate boards, period.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but 50% of the
You
countries
came in the middle,
the
Kim.
world have. Hi, Kim. 50% of the countries in the world now have some kind of gender quota in terms of electing women to achieve that equal representation. So there are a lot of people who think that may be the case. Just we're talking 50%. We're not talking about taking the men out. I wouldn't advocate for that at all.
We don't have to worry about it here on Pod TV because we have a female as head of Pod TV.
You better be careful what you say.
You know what? I love Sasha. We've been doing TV shows together probably 3 years now. There's nothing he could say that doesn't surprise me yet. I believe he has a guillotine in his basement. So, but when we talk about things like this, there are good and bad people everywhere. And I think one of the greatest examples of this scenario, and I don't judge people by their gender or gender choice or any of that or race. But like everyone feared for me going to Colombia. Oh, it's the world's worst place. You're going to get killed. You're going to get robbed. The cartel runs it. I'm going to tell you right now, I never felt safer than I had when I was in Colombia. I even took a bus from one of the main cities out to the countryside. It's so dangerous, people, that the whole town, everyone leaves their doors open so that you can look in and see their decorations for the holidays. The whole town gets together and celebrates in the middle of the town. And personally, I think there's bad and good everywhere.
I'm sorry, kid, what town are we talking about?
See it. But, there are gangs in Colombia. They're called the cartel, just like there's the mafia and gangs in the United States. The difference is the cartel, when they want to get out of their gangs, just like ours, you're going to die probably, and so is your family. But they have a place to go. They can run to America. In America, we have nowhere else to go. This is the haven for mafia, for gangs, and for government who think they're mafia and gangs. So, and I'll probably get audited now for saying that. But the thing is,
you're always getting audited one way or the other.
Everywhere, and I don't think it matters what gender or race you put on a board or how diverse you make it. I think the diversity is the integrity. Okay, the integrity of the people. We need to stop looking at color and race and genders. We need to respect everyone. And that's where it's going to make a difference. Am I right, Mark?
No, I hear what you're saying, Kim, but I will just kind of like push back slightly because I do think that having served on a couple of boards and having a mom that served on a number of boards, that it is oftentimes in working with different organizations important that there is a variety of views. I mean, there is a reason that you have a financial person on the board because a lot of us don't have that financial wisdom, and there's a reason that a lot of times.
Mark, are you saying diversity of thought?
Huh?
Are you saying diversity of thought?
Diversity of thought, but also diversity of views and diversity of thought, and that diversity needs to be in most good boards that I've been part of. There are women well represented. There are different ethnicities well represented. For example, if you're in the cultural arts space, you want to be able to have people that can bring that Latin view, that Asian view, or some of the other views to the whole notion and everything. So that's what I'm saying, diversity of thought, but also diversity of backgrounds. I know that there were intentions to make sure that there were people that were representing certain communities, be that LGBT communities or even certain religious communities. So I just think that that is the nature of a good board, is that you have people that are able to bring certain talents into the board, including some of their skill sets. Like I said, I would not know
I appreciate you.
accounting, so I would want an accountant on my board.
No, I appreciate you throwing in backgrounds more so than skin color, because people of different skin color do not necessarily have different backgrounds.
Yeah.
For those of us who grew up
think-
and are educated in mixed neighborhoods,
I think
everybody, go on.
I think we put too much value too on highly educated. I think it's people who have the experience. And Debbie, you made a point that in some cases women are more fiduciary and due diligent with financials, and I think it's because we have to be. Men don't have to be. They make more money. We're our toes are put to the fire to always perform better. We're judged differently. Where men will get fame for making a mistake, women will be shamed. It has been that way, in time in history. If a man and a woman had sex and the woman gets pregnant, she would be shamed for having sex with him. She would be shamed for getting pregnant while he gets famed and pat on the back. So we're rewriting a little bit of this history. We're changing that because women are getting stronger. We're standing up a little bit more and saying, no, that's not the way this game is played. But in history, that's the way, and you can't dispute it. I don't care how you or anyone else thinks.
It's in all cultures. It's like, I don't know why.
Right.
Makes no sense.
But I think women have always been made to have to perform better. And that's why we are better financially in certain areas, or better at the end result of someone, because we can't make a mistake like some men are afforded that right to make a mistake. So I agree with you, Debbie. And as an entrepreneur, you know that this is probably the way it has been for a long time. I don't know if we can change anything. I don't think I have any more extra empathy than some of the men I work with, just because I'm a female. I think some of them have a bigger, tender heart than I can have at times. So I know Mark does. So, and I know Sasha does, even though he comes across as a big badass in Canada, but
with a guillotine in the basement.
And yeah, the guillotine.
The guillotine. What more do you need?
Right. But,
I'm just curious, Sasha, has it been used or is it brand new?
From the bottom of my heart, for the conversations that we have at this level, because it really opens up the door and allows people an open mind to think about these things. These are tough subjects. These aren't something that you could just sit down at work and lay out on the table because you can get fired. So I think it's beautiful that we're opening up these subject matters and having real life, real people discussions from real experiences, which you don't see on CNN. But, Mark, I think we hit the top of the hour. And thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to let Mark close up. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we'll see you same time tomorrow. And don't forget to watch Sasha's show on investing following this show, because it's really a great way to change your future, is to learn. And learn from other people's experiences, right?
The investment show will be tomorrow at 1:00.
Oh, tomorrow at 1. Sorry.
Wednesday at 1.
Right now, we will have Ukrainian show.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, then learn about what's going on in Ukrainian and Russia. I need to brush up on my TV show slots. But don't forget to watch Sasha. He puts in a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of effort in educating us about the world so that we do have a better future. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Take care, Kim. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Debbie. Bye.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Mark?
Seems like Mark went for a walk.
I think Mark went for a walk. We are Tuesday, right?
Yes, we are.
I don't know what he did with the intro, but I will put us out. Thank you, everyone, and have a great time.
You too. Thank you.